The air in the penthouse was suffocating, not because of the smoke from the city below, but because of the silence. For 7 years, the 6 a.m. chime of the teakettle had been the heartbeat of Kong Hanbin's empire. Today, for the first time, the heart had stopped. Hanbin, a man whose name moved markets and silenced rivals, stood in the center of a cramped, one-bedroom apartment in a district his drivers usually avoided. He looked like a predator out of water. His bespoke suit, worth more than the building itself, brushed against a wall covered in faded photographs. His men stood at the door, hands on their holsters, expecting to find a thief or a traitor. Instead, they found their boss frozen in front of a small, scratched wooden desk. "Sir," his second-in-command whispered, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "We should go. This place isn't secure." Hanbin didn't move. In his hand was a folder he had found tucked inside a hollowed-out Bible. It wasn't full of stolen money or syndicate secrets. It was full of hospital bills, and a stack of letters addressed to him, dated over the last 5 years, none of them ever sent. As he read the first page, the cold, calculated mask of the Ice King of Seoul shattered. His hand trembled. He realized that the woman who had cleaned his porcelain and mended his shirts wasn't just a maid. She had been his silent guardian, a woman who had sacrificed her own health to hide a scandal that would have toppled his family's legacy decades ago. She hadn't missed work because she was lazy. She had missed work because the very people Hanbin protected had finally tracked her down to silence the truth she held for him. He looked at the empty bed, the sheets still warm, the signs of a struggle evident in the overturned chair. The fury that rose in him wasn't the loud, crashing kind. It was the silent, absolute cold of a winter execution. "She wasn't serving me tea all these years," Hanbin said, his voice a low, terrifying vibration that made his enforcers bow their heads. "She was serving as my shield. And while I was counting my billions, I let the wolves take the only person who actually cared if I lived through the night." He turned, his eyes burning with a dark, renewed purpose. "Find the men who took her. Do not harm them. Bring them to the basement of the shipyard. I want them to look into the eyes of the man they just created. They thought they were kidnapping a maid. They don't realize they just stole the soul of the syndicate." Before we continue with this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We love connecting with our viewers from all around the world. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button right now. You don't want to miss what happens next. Trust me, this story is about to take you on a ride you'll never forget. The morning had begun like any other for Kong Hanbin. He woke at exactly 5:47 a.m., as he had for the past 15 years. His internal clock was more precise than any Swiss timepiece. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, casting geometric shadows across the minimalist interior. Everything in his world was ordered, measured, controlled. Except today, something was wrong. By 6:05 a.m., when the familiar sound of the teakettle's whistle hadn't pierced the morning silence, Hanbin felt the first crack in his carefully constructed routine. He sat at the edge of his bed, listening to the emptiness of his home. No soft footsteps in the hallway. No gentle clink of porcelain against the marble countertop. No humming of old gospel songs that Imani always sang under her breath when she thought no one was listening. Imani Okafor. His housekeeper for 7 years. A woman from Nigeria who had arrived in Seoul with nothing but a worn suitcase and a determination that reminded him of his own mother. She never spoke much, never asked for anything beyond her modest salary, and never ever missed a day of work. Until today. Hanbin stood and walked through his penthouse, each room echoing with an absence he couldn't quite name. The living room was pristine, as always. The kitchen gleamed. But there was no warmth, no life. He realized, with a discomfort that felt foreign to a man of his stature, that he had never actually learned to make his own tea. He picked up his phone and dialed his chief of security, Kwon Jae-sung, a man who had been by his side since they were teenagers running protection rackets in Itaewon. Jae-sung. Imani didn't come to work today. There was a pause on the other end. Jae-sung knew better than to dismiss anything Hanbin said as trivial. I'll look into it immediately, Hyungnim. No, Hanbin said, surprising even himself. I'll go myself. Another pause, longer this time. Sir, that's unusual. I can send someone. I said I'll go myself. Hanbin ended the call before Jae-sung could protest further. He didn't understand his own insistence. Perhaps it was the disruption to his routine. Perhaps it was something else, something he wasn't ready to examine. All he knew was that the silence in his penthouse felt like a warning. Within 30 minutes, Hanbin was in the back of his armored sedan, Jae-sung driving while two other security personnel followed in a second vehicle. They headed toward the Garabong district, a neighborhood Hanbin rarely visited. It was too far removed from the glittering towers and exclusive clubs where he conducted his business. Here, the buildings were shorter, older, stained with decades of rain and neglect. The streets were already alive with morning activity. Workers heading to factories, elderly women pulling carts to the market, children in school uniforms laughing and shoving each other. Hanbin watched them through tinted windows, feeling like an observer from another dimension. She lives here, he asked, genuinely surprised. Yes, sir. Third floor of that building. Jae-sung pointed to a structure that looked like it had been beige once, maybe 30 years ago. Now it was the color of forgotten things. They parked, and immediately the atmosphere shifted. People on the street noticed the expensive cars, the men in dark suits. Some crossed to the other side of the road. Others pretended not to see. Everyone knew what men like these represented. Hanbin stepped out of the car, and the morning air hit him differently here. It smelled of cooking oil and kimchi, of laundry detergent and diesel exhaust. It smelled real in a way his penthouse never did. The building had no elevator. They climbed the narrow stairs, their footsteps echoing in the concrete stairwell. Graffiti covered the walls, some of it artistic, most of it angry. Hanbin's guards stayed close, hands near their weapons, but he felt no threat here. Only a growing unease. Apartment 302. The door was ajar. Jae-sung moved first, pushing the door open with his foot, hand on his gun. But there was no ambush waiting, no danger. Just emptiness. Hanbin entered slowly, and immediately felt the wrongness. The apartment was small, just one bedroom and a combination kitchen-living area, but it was meticulously clean. He recognized Imani's touch in the way everything was arranged with care, despite the poverty of the surroundings. Photographs covered one wall, a timeline of a life he knew nothing about. Imani is a young girl in Nigeria, smiling in a school uniform. Imani with an older woman who must have been her mother. Imani at the airport, arriving in Seoul, looking both terrified and hopeful. And then there were newer photos. Candid shots of her in Seoul, but always alone. No friends, no family. Just her in various locations around the city, as if she were documenting her own solitary existence. Hanbin moved through the apartment like a man in a dream. His guards searched for clues, for signs of forced entry, for anything that would explain the situation. But Hanbin was drawn to the small desk in the corner of the bedroom. It was old, the wood scratched and scarred, the kind of furniture that had passed through many hands before finding its way here. On top of it sat a Bible, its leather cover cracked with age and use. Hanbin picked it up, feeling the weight of it, and something shifted inside. The book fell open unnaturally, hollowed out. Inside was a folder. His hands were steady as he opened it. Years of controlling his reactions in high-stakes negotiations had trained him well. But nothing could have prepared him for what he found inside. Hospital bills. Dozens of them, dating back 5 years. Seoul National University Hospital. Severance Hospital. Samsung Medical Center. The amounts were staggering, even to a man of Hanbin's wealth. Treatment for stage 3 kidney disease. Dialysis. Medications with names he couldn't pronounce. All in Imani Okafor's name. Beneath the medical documents were letters. 23 of them, each one addressed to him in Imani's careful handwriting. Each one sealed. Each one never sent. Hanbin's fingers trembled as he opened the first envelope. The date was from 5 years ago, just 2 years after Imani had started working for him. Dear Mr. Kong, it began. I am writing this letter knowing I will never give it to you. But I need to put these words somewhere, even if only God will read them. The letter went on to describe how she had been diagnosed with kidney disease, how she had been working extra jobs to pay for her treatment, how she was terrified of losing her position with him because it was the only stability she had in this foreign country. But that wasn't what made Hanbin's blood run cold. The final paragraph read, I discovered something yesterday. Something about your father. I wasn't trying to find it. I was just cleaning the study like always, and the drawer was left open. I saw the documents, the photographs. I know about what happened in 1995, about the prosecutor and his family. I know about the cover-up. Mr. Kong, I don't know what to do with this information. I am just a maid. But I am also a woman who believes in right and wrong. For now, I have put everything back exactly as I found it. I will pray for guidance. I will pray for your soul. And I will keep your home clean, because that is all I know how to do. Hanbin felt the world tilt beneath his feet. 1995, the year his father, Kang Dae-young, had orchestrated the murder of prosecutor Yoon Tae-hyun and his entire family to prevent an investigation into the syndicate's political connections. It was the secret that had built the Kang Empire's untouchability, the bodies upon which their throne was constructed. Only 5 people in the world knew the complete truth about that night. His father was dead. 2 of the others had been eliminated over the years to ensure silence. That left only Hanbin and his uncle, Kang Seok-jun. And now, apparently, a Nigerian maid had known for 5 years. But she had kept the secret. More than that, she had continued to serve him, to make his tea, to fold his clothes, to hum her gospel songs while carrying the weight of his family's darkest sin. Sir? Jae-sung's voice broke through his thoughts. There are signs of a struggle. The chair was knocked over. We found blood on the carpet near the door. Not much, but enough. Hanbin looked up, his eyes refocusing on the present. How much blood? Looks like someone was struck, not stabbed. Probably to subdue her. Fingerprints? Witnesses. We're working on it. But this neighborhood, people don't talk to men like us. Hanbin returned to the letters, opening them one by one. Each letter chronicled Imani's life, her deteriorating health, her struggles to afford treatment while sending money home to her family in Lagos. Her loneliness in a city that saw her as both exotic and invisible. Her guilt about knowing his secret and her internal battle about what to do with that knowledge. But more than anything, the letters revealed something Hanbin had never expected. Imani cared about him. Not the way an employee cares about a paycheck, but genuinely, deeply cared. She wrote about noticing when he looked tired, about adjusting his tea's strength when she sensed he was stressed, about praying for his safety when she heard news of conflicts within the Seoul underworld. She wrote about seeing him as more than the Ice King, seeing him as a man burdened by a legacy he never chose. The most recent letter was dated just 3 days ago. Dear Mr. Kong, it read. Tonight I was followed home from your penthouse. It wasn't the first time, but this time was different. The car didn't try to hide. When I got to my building, a man in a gray suit was waiting in the lobby. He didn't say anything, just looked at me and smiled. It was not a kind smile. I think they know. I don't know how, but I think they know what I know. I am writing this letter in case something happens. In case I don't make it to work one morning. Please know that I never told anyone your secret. I never would have. Not because I am afraid of you, but because despite everything, I believe you are a better man than your father was. I have seen it in small moments, in the way you speak to your staff with respect that others of your position do not show. You have a chance to be different, Mr. Kong. Don't waste it. I have placed copies of all the documents I found in a safe location, with instructions that they should be destroyed if anything happens to me. This is not blackmail. This is protection for both of us. If they take me, they will have taken me for nothing. The secret will still be safe. Your empire will still stand. But please, Mr. Kong, please don't let my silence be for nothing. Be the man I believe you can be. Sincerely, Imani Okafor. Hanbin stood slowly, the letters still clutched in his hand. The fury that had been building since he entered this apartment now crystallized into something pure and focused. They took her, he said quietly. Sir? Jae-sung stepped closer. The men who followed her. They took her. They think she knows about my father, about 1995. He turned to face his second-in-command, and Jae-sung took an involuntary step back. The expression on Hanbin's face was one he had never seen before. It was beyond anger, beyond rage. It was the look of a man who had just realized he had failed the one person who had protected him when she had every reason not to. Find them, Hanbin said, his voice deadly calm. I want everyone in the organization mobilized. Check every camera, every informant, every street corner between here and my penthouse. Find out who has been watching her. Find out who gave the order. And when you find them, bring them to the shipyard basement. Alive. I want them to understand exactly what they've done. Jae-sung nodded and immediately began making calls, barking orders into his phone. The other guards spread out, photographing the apartment, collecting evidence. But Hanbin remained still, standing in the middle of Imani's small bedroom, surrounded by the humble artifacts of a life lived in service and silence. For 7 years, this woman had made his world function. And for 7 years, he had never once asked her how she was, where she lived, what her dreams were. He had never even asked her how she took her own tea. The Seoul Metropolitan Police Department's 7th Precinct received an unusual visit that afternoon. Officers stationed at the front desk straightened unconsciously when Kong Hanbin walked through the doors, flanked by 2 of his men. He wasn't hiding who he was. In fact, he seemed to want everyone to know. Captain Yoon Suk-ho, a 20-year veteran who had seen everything the city had to offer, watched from his office as the notorious syndicate boss approached. He had never met Hanbin personally, but he knew the face from intelligence briefings. The Ice King of Seoul. Untouchable. Until now, apparently. Mr. Kong, Yun said, stepping out of his office before Hanbin could be turned away. This is unexpected. What brings you to our precinct? Hanbin's gaze was direct, unflinching. I need to report a kidnapping. The entire floor seemed to pause. Officers looked up from their desks. Phone conversations quieted. In the underworld, disputes were handled internally. The fact that Hanbin was involving the police was unprecedented. Perhaps we should discuss this in my office, Yun suggested, acutely aware of the dozens of ears listening. Once inside with the door closed, Hanbin laid out the situation with a precision that suggested he had rehearsed every word. He provided Imani's name, her address, the time frame of her disappearance, and photographs from her apartment. He omitted nothing except the letters and their contents. She's your housekeeper? Yun asked, making notes. For 7 years. And you believe this is a kidnapping, not a voluntary absence? There was blood. Signs of struggle. And she has never missed a day of work. Yun studied the man across from him. Hanbin's reputation was that of a cold, calculating businessman who happened to operate outside the law. But right now, he looked like a man barely containing a storm. Mr. Kong, forgive me for being direct, but people in your line of work don't typically involve law enforcement in their affairs. Why come here? Because whoever took her thinks I won't, Hanbin replied. They think I'll handle this through my own channels, quietly, where they can control the situation. They're wrong. I want this investigation official. I want it documented. I want there to be no shadows for them to hide in. It was a smart play, Yun had to admit. By bringing in the police, Hanbin was changing the rules of engagement. If Imani turned up dead now, it would be an official murder investigation, not an underworld disappearance that could be swept away. I'll assign detectives immediately, Yun said. But I have to ask, do you have any idea who might have taken her or why? Hanbin stood, straightening his jacket. I have suspicions. But I'll leave the official investigation to you, Captain. I'm sure you understand that I'll be conducting my own inquiries simultaneously. Mr. Kong. She saved my life once, Hanbin said, the words seeming to surprise even him. Not dramatically. Not by taking a bullet or defusing a bomb. She saved my life by making sure I had a reason to come home every day for 7 years. By making sure there was someone in my world who saw me as a human being rather than a transaction. The men who took her have no idea what they've actually stolen. But they're about to learn. After Hanbin left, Yun sat at his desk, staring at the photographs of Imani Okafor. She was beautiful in an understated way, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She looked nothing like someone who would be caught up in syndicate politics. He picked up his phone and called Detective Mina, his best investigator. Mina, I've got something unusual for you. Meanwhile, Hanbin returned to his penthouse to find his entire inner circle assembled in his private conference room. These were the 8 men who ran the various arms of his organization. Kwon Jae-sung oversaw security, Baek Tae-yang handled financial operations, Ryu Dong-wook managed their political connections, Park Kyung-soo ran enforcement, No Jin-woo controlled their shipping operations, Shin Yun-ho oversaw their casino and entertainment holdings, Wang Suk-min handled intelligence gathering, and Nam Gwi-hyun managed their real estate empire. They were powerful men who commanded their own crews, men who had built the Kong Empire alongside Hanbin since his father's death 8 years ago. And right now, every one of them was about to learn that their world was built on a secret one woman had kept. 7 hours ago, Hanbin began without preamble. My housekeeper, Amani Okafor, was kidnapped from her apartment in Garabong. Some of you probably didn't even know her name. I didn't, not really. Not beyond what was on her employment file. But for 7 years, she has been in my home 6 days a week. She has had access to everything, my papers, my phone calls, my meetings. Everything. The men exchanged glances. They knew where this was going. 5 years ago, Imani discovered documentation about 1995. About Prosecutor Yoon and his family. About my father's role. About the cover-up. The temperature in the room dropped. Park Kyung-soo's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon. Nam Gwi-hyun's face went pale. She never told anyone, Hanbin continued. She kept the secret, continued to work for me, and asked for nothing in return. While she was dying from kidney disease. While she could barely afford her treatment. While she lived in an apartment that most of you wouldn't let your dogs sleep in. She kept my family's secret, and for that loyalty, she was taken. Someone knew she knew. Someone wanted to eliminate the threat. And I need to know who. Hyungnim, Ryu Dongwook spoke carefully, with respect. How do we know she didn't tell anyone? How do we know this isn't? She's been hospitalized multiple times in the past 5 years, Hanbin cut him off. If she wanted to sell that information, she could have paid for the best treatment in the country. Instead, she worked herself sick to pay her bills and never asked me for an extra one. That's how I know. Baek Taeyang leaned forward. So someone has been watching her. Someone knew she was a vulnerability. Which means someone has been watching all of us, Wang Sukmin added quietly. If they knew to target her, they've been doing surveillance for months, maybe years. I want a full audit, Hanbin ordered. Every person in our organization, every phone line, every location. Someone has been leaking information. Find them. But more importantly, find Imani. I want her found within 24 hours. And if we don't find her in time? No, Jinwoo asked the question everyone was thinking. Hanbin's expression was arctic. Then I want the people responsible found within 48 hours. And I want them to understand that they didn't just kidnap my maid. They declared war on the entire Kong organization. This is personal for me. I'm making it personal for all of you. Whoever took her has insulted every man in this room by assuming we would allow this. Prove them wrong. As the meeting dispersed, Jae-sung lingered behind. Hyungnim, there's something else you should know. I've been making calls. Asking questions. The street is silent about this. No one is talking. Not our usual informants, not the small crews, not even the independents who usually can't keep their mouths shut. What does that tell you? It tells me this is bigger than street level. Whoever did this has enough power to enforce silence across multiple territories. That's not easy in Seoul. Hanbin walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city. Somewhere down there, Imani was being held. Frightened. Possibly hurt. All because she had been kind enough to keep his family's secret. My uncle, Hanbin said quietly. Suk-jun would have the reach to enforce that kind of silence. Jae-sung went very still. Are you sure you want to go down that path? If you're wrong. I'm not wrong. Hanbin turned from the window. He's the only other person who knows the complete truth about 1995. He's also been pushing for me to step down, to let him take over operations. He's mentioned multiple times that I'm too soft, too modern in my approach. That I've lost the killer instinct that built this organization. You think he's trying to force you out? I think he's trying to prove I'm weak. What better way than to show I can't even protect my own staff? To show that I'm so disconnected from my empire that threats can operate inside my own home? Jae-sung nodded slowly. If you're right, this is about to get very bloody. Only if he wants it to be, Hanbin replied. I'm going to give him one chance to make this right. For my father's memory, for family loyalty. One chance. And if he doesn't take it? Hanbin's smile was cold enough to freeze blood. Then he'll learn that being soft doesn't mean being weak. It just means I've been choosing not to show what I'm capable of. That choice ends the moment I confirm he took her. The Kong family compound in Gangnam was a fortress disguised as luxury. Behind walls topped with cameras and guards dressed as gardeners, the estate sprawled across grounds that had been in the family for 3 generations. This was where Hanbin's grandfather had first established the syndicate's power, where his father had built an empire, and where his uncle now resided, claiming to be the keeper of family tradition. Hanbin arrived without announcement at 9 p.m., late enough to be aggressive, early enough to catch his uncle off guard. The guards at the gate recognized him immediately and opened without question. They were his men, not Suk-jun's, regardless of where they were stationed. He found his uncle in the study that had once belonged to his father, sitting behind the massive mahogany desk that represented decades of accumulated power. Kang Suk-jun was 58, silver-haired, distinguished, with the kind of face that inspired confidence in boardrooms and terror in back alleys. He looked up when Hanbin entered without knocking, his expression registering surprise before settling into practiced neutrality. "Nephew. I didn't expect you tonight." "No, I'm sure you didn't." Hanbin closed the door behind him and didn't sit. "Where is she?" Suk-jun set down the glass of whiskey he'd been drinking. "I'm going to need more context than that." "My housekeeper. Imani Okafor. She was taken from her apartment this morning." "I'm asking you as family, uncle, before I ask as the head of this organization, where is she?" The older man's face showed nothing but mild confusion. "Hanbin, I have no idea what you're talking about." "Your housekeeper was kidnapped?" "That's concerning, but why would you think I have anything to do with it?" "Because she knew about 1995. About father and prosecutor Yoon. About the real story." Now something flickered in Suk-jun's eyes. "Not guilt, calculation." "I see. And how did your housekeeper come to know about that?" "She found documents in my study 5 years ago. She never told anyone. She kept the secret. But someone knew she knew. Someone has been watching her. And the only people who would care about protecting that secret are in this family." Suk-jun stood slowly, walking to the window that overlooked the compound's gardens. "You think I would have your employee kidnapped?" "Your father's legacy is my legacy, Hanbin. Why would I create chaos that could expose us both? To prove I'm weak. To show the organization that I can't even secure my own household. To justify a transition of power." His uncle turned, and for the first time, there was something sharp in his expression. "You want to know what I think? I think you've gotten soft. I think 7 years of playing businessman instead of boss has made you forget what this empire is built on. It's not built on politeness and proper tea service. It's built on fear. On the willingness to do what others won't. Your father understood that. I understand that. But you've been trying to legitimate us, to make us respectable, and in doing so, you've made us vulnerable. That's not an answer to my question. Here's your answer. No, I didn't take your maid. But honestly? I'm not surprised someone did. You've created a comfortable little bubble in that penthouse, surrounded yourself with staff you treat like friends instead of employees. In our world, that's not kindness, it's a liability. Every person who gets close to you is a potential weakness. Your father taught you that. Or tried to. Hanbin absorbed this, watching his uncle carefully. The old man was either genuinely ignorant or the best liar in Seoul. Given his years in the organization, both were possible. If you didn't take her, help me find who did. Why? Suk-jun returned to his desk, refreshing his whiskey. She's just a maid. Hire another one. This emotional attachment you're displaying is exactly what I'm talking about. It's unseemly. She kept our secret for 5 years while dying from kidney disease. She could have destroyed this family and chose not to. That's not just a maid, that's the kind of loyalty we claim to value in this organization. Loyalty is rewarded with payment, which I assume you provided. She was worth more than I paid her. She deserved better than to be taken for protecting us. Suk-jun studied his nephew for a long moment. You're making this personal. It is personal. That's your mistake. In this business, nothing can be personal. Not if you want to survive. He paused, then sighed. But you're right about one thing. If someone is targeting your household, it's a threat to the organization. I'll make some calls. See what I can learn. But Hanbin, when we find who did this, you need to let me handle it. You're too emotionally involved. I'll handle it my way. Your way is what created this problem. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. These were two men who had fought beside each other, who shared blood and history, but who saw the future of their empire very differently. And both knew that at some point, one of them would have to concede or be removed. Make your calls, Hanbin said finally. But understand this, uncle, if I find out you're lying to me, family won't protect you. Not from this. He left without waiting for a response, and as he walked through the compound's gardens toward his car, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Hwang Suk-min, his intelligence chief. Found something. Come to the safe house in Mapo immediately. 20 minutes later, Hanbin was in a nondescript building in Mapo-gu, climbing stairs to the third-floor apartment his organization used for sensitive meetings. Inside, Wang had set up a command center with laptops, surveillance equipment, and printed documents spread across every surface. What did you find? Hanbin demanded. Hwang pulled up a video on one of the laptops. This is from a traffic camera 3 blocks from Amani's apartment, time-stamped at 5:47 a.m. today. He pressed play. The grainy footage showed a black van, no plates visible, pulling away from the curb. Just before it turned the corner, the back door slid open slightly, and for a split second, the video captured a woman's face pressed against the gap. It was unmistakably Amani, her eyes wide with fear. Hanbin's hands clenched into fists. Can you track the van? We've been trying, but they knew what they were doing. They stayed off major roads, avoided most cameras. But we got lucky. Hwang pulled up another image. This is from a private security camera at a warehouse in Incheon. Same van, same time frame. They stopped here for approximately 7 minutes, then moved on. We're checking other cameras in the area, but there's a lot of blind spots. Why stop at a warehouse? We sent someone to check it out. Found this. Huang handed him a photograph. It showed a message spray-painted on the warehouse wall in red, "Ice King melts in the heat." Hanbin stared at the message. It wasn't just a taunt, it was a declaration. Whoever had taken Imani wanted him to know this was directed at him specifically. "There's more," Huang continued. "I've been analyzing phone records like you asked. 3 days ago, there was a call from a burner phone to your uncle's private line. It lasted 47 seconds. That same burner phone made 6 other calls that day, 4 to numbers we've identified as belonging to a crew out of Incheon, 1 to a lawyer who specializes in disposing of problems, and 1 to a medical facility that's known to treat people with no questions asked." Suk-jun, Hanbin breathed. Maybe. Or maybe someone trying to frame him. The call pattern is almost too obvious, like they wanted us to find it. Hanbin paced the small apartment, his mind working through scenarios. His uncle had seemed genuinely surprised, but he was also practiced at deception. The evidence suggested his involvement, but it could also be misdirection. And if it was misdirection, that meant someone else was playing a deeper game. The crew in Incheon, who runs them? Small operation. They do kidnappings, enforcement, disposal. Boss is a guy named Cho Byung-hoon. Ex-military, dishonorably discharged 5 years ago. He's freelance, works for whoever pays. Bring him in. Quietly. Already on it. Jae-sung has a team moving on his location now. Hanbin's phone rang. It was Detective Oh-mina from the police department. "Mr. Kong? I'm calling because we've made some progress on your housekeeper's case. We found witnesses who saw a black van in the area around the time of the disappearance. We've also been reviewing her phone records. She made several calls to a number we've traced to a legal clinic in Mapo. Apparently, she was seeking advice about how to handle knowledge of a serious crime." Hanbin's heart sank. When? The calls started about a week ago. The most recent was 2 days before her disappearance. "Mr. Kong, I need to ask, what exactly did your housekeeper know?" "Nothing that's relevant to finding her." "With respect, sir, I think it might be very relevant. If she was seeking legal advice, she may have told someone what she knew. That person could be either helping or threatening her." Hanbin made a decision. "Detective, I'm going to be honest with you. Imani discovered sensitive information about my family. She never shared it with anyone to my knowledge, but she may have been targeted because of it. I need her found before whoever took her decides she's too much of a risk to keep alive." There was a long pause. "Mr. Kong, are you telling me your housekeeper was kidnapped because she knew about criminal activity?" "I'm telling you she was kidnapped because she was loyal enough to keep quiet about it. Which makes her a better person than most people I know, including myself. Please, detective. Find her." After hanging up, Hanbin turned to find Huang watching him with an expression that was almost sympathetic. "You really care about her, don't you?" Huang asked quietly. "She was the only honest thing in my life," Hanbin admitted. "Every other person I interact with wants something from me. Power, money, protection, fear. Imani just wanted to do her job and go home. She didn't worship me or fear me. She just saw me. And somehow, despite knowing the worst thing about my family, she chose to protect me anyway. How do you not care about someone like that?" His phone buzzed again. This time it was Jae-sung. "We have Cho. He's at the shipyard. But boss, you need to get here fast." He's talking, and what he's saying changes everything. The shipyard basement was exactly what it sounded like, a concrete tomb beneath the legitimate operations that served as one of the Kong organization's oldest holdings. It smelled of salt, rust, and fear. Over the decades, many problems had been solved in this space. Many decisions had been made here. And tonight, Cho Byung-hoon was learning what it meant to have lied to the wrong people. Hanbin descended the stairs to find the freelance operative duct taped to a metal chair, his face already showing the evidence of Jae-sung's preliminary questioning. Blood dripped from Cho's nose, and one eye was swelling shut. But he was conscious and, judging by the desperation in his remaining good eye, ready to talk. Park Kyung-soo stood against the wall, brass knuckles gleaming on his right hand. Jae-sung was pacing, his usually calm demeanor cracked with barely contained violence. And in the corner, reviewing something on his tablet, was Baek Tae-yang. "Boss," Jae-sung greeted Hanbin with a slight bow. "We picked him up at his apartment. He tried to run. Broke Sung-ho's nose in the process." "Then I suppose we're even," Hanbin said, looking at Cho's battered face. He pulled up a metal stool and sat directly in front of the kidnapper, close enough that their knees almost touched. When Hanbin spoke, his voice was conversational, almost friendly. "Mr. Cho, I understand you've been freelancing recently. Specifically, I understand you were hired to pick up a woman from Garabong this morning. I'd like to know who hired you, where you took her, and if she's still alive. In return for this information, I'll make sure your death is quick. Does that seem fair?" Cho's good eye widened. "I'll tell you everything. Please. I didn't know who she was to you. I swear, I thought it was just a standard pickup." "Who hired you?" "I don't know his real name. We've done business before, but it's always through intermediaries. He pays well, always in crypto, always clean. This time, he wanted the woman picked up, held for 72 hours, then released unharmed. That's it. No torture, no interrogation, just hold her and let her go." "Where is she?" Cho hesitated, and Park Kyung-soo took a step forward. The message was clear. "There's a warehouse in Incheon," Cho said quickly. "Near the old fish processing district. Unit 47B. She's there with two of my guys, Min and Jong-soo. They have orders to keep her fed, hydrated, and untouched. Like I said, this was supposed to be clean." "Why 72 hours?" "I don't know. The client just said hold her for 3 days, then let her go in a public place where she'd be safe. Honestly, it seemed weird to me. Usually, if someone goes to the trouble of kidnapping someone, it's permanent. This felt more like they wanted her out of the way temporarily." Hanbin considered this. "You said you've worked for this client before. What kind of jobs?" "Surveillance mostly. Following people, documenting their routines, who they meet with. Professional stuff. Never anything messy until now." "Who has he had you surveilling?" Cho went very quiet. Even beaten and threatened, he understood that this answer would cross a line. "Mr. Cho," Hanbin said softly, "I'm going to be very clear about your situation. Right now, my housekeeper is terrified in a warehouse because of you. Every minute she spends there is a minute of her life that's been stolen. Every moment of fear she's experiencing is your fault. So you can either tell me what I want to know, and I'll make this quick, or you can stay silent, and I'll let Park here show you what happens to people who waste my time." He's been very patient, but I can see he's eager to continue his work. "You," Cho said finally, his voice breaking. "He had me surveilling you. For the past 6 months. Your movements, your meetings, your household. He wanted to know everything about your daily life. The woman, Imani, she came up as a person of interest because she had such consistent access to you. Did you report directly to this client? No. There was a handler. A lawyer named Young Ji Take. He coordinates between the client and contractors like me. If you're looking for who hired me, Young is your next step. Hanbin stood and nodded to Beck. Transfer the information on the warehouse to Jaesung. Assemble a team. I want Imani extracted within the hour. And him? Park asked, gesturing to Cho. Hanbin looked down at the broken man in the chair. He cooperated. He gets the quick death I promised. But make sure his crew in Incheon knows what happened. I want the message clear. Anyone who touches my people answers to me personally. He turned and climbed the stairs, hearing Cho's final pleas cut short by a single gunshot. Outside, the night air felt cleaner, though Hanbin knew that was an illusion. Everything in his world was dirty. Even his mercy was just a more efficient form of violence. His phone rang. It was Detective Omina again. Mr. Kong, we've located the van. It's abandoned in Incheon. We're processing it now, but it's been thoroughly cleaned. However, we found something interesting. Inside the glove compartment, there was a business card for a law firm, Young and Associates. Does that name mean anything to you? Hanbin smiled grimly. It does now. Thank you, Detective. Mr. Kong, I need to be straight with you. My captain is getting pressure from above to drop this investigation. Someone with influence doesn't want us digging into this. That tells me this is bigger than a simple kidnapping. Detective, if you drop it now, you'll never know how big it really is. Give me 24 hours. If I haven't resolved this by then, I'll bring you everything I've learned. You have my word. Your word as a criminal? My word as a man who wants the same thing you do. Justice for someone who didn't deserve what happened to her. Another pause. 24 hours, Mr. Kong. Then I'm coming after you if you don't deliver. As Hanbin drove toward the warehouse in Incheon, Jaesung in the passenger seat and a full security team following in 2 other vehicles, he finally allowed himself to think about what Cho had revealed. Someone had been watching him for 6 months. Someone had identified Imani as important enough to target. Someone was playing a game that involved removing her for exactly 3 days. It's a test, he said aloud. Sir? Whoever is behind this, they're testing me. They want to see how I'll react. Will I go to the police? Will I handle it quietly? Will I tear the city apart? Every move I make is being evaluated. By who? I don't know yet. But I'm about to find out. The warehouse district in Incheon was a ghost town at night, a labyrinth of abandoned buildings and rusted shipping containers. Unit 47B was exactly where Cho had said it would be, a corrugated metal structure that looked like it hadn't been used for legitimate business in years. Hanbin's team approached with military precision, surrounding the building before making entry. When they breached the door, they found exactly what Cho had described: 2 men, one reading a magazine, the other watching a portable television. Both reached for their weapons but never managed to draw them before Hanbin's men had them subdued. And there, in a corner of the warehouse, sitting on a cot with a bottle of water and a half-eaten meal beside her, was Imani Okafor. She looked up when the door burst open, fear transforming to confusion and then to recognition. When she saw Hanbin, something broke in her expression, and tears began streaming down her face. Mr. Kong, she whispered, as if unsure he was real. Hanbin crossed the warehouse in 3 strides and dropped to one knee in front of her. I'm here. You're safe now. I've got you. Imani let out a sob and collapsed forward, and without thinking, Hanbin caught her, holding this woman who had held his secrets for 5 years. She trembled against him, and he realized that in all the time she had worked for him, he had never once touched her beyond a handshake. Now, holding her as she wept with relief, he understood how profoundly he had failed her. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry I never saw how vulnerable you were. I'm sorry for all of it. You came, she said through her tears. I didn't think. I thought maybe you wouldn't. I'm just your maid. You're not just anything, Hanbin replied fiercely. And I will never let anyone hurt you again. That's a promise. He helped her to her feet, wrapping his jacket around her shoulders. She was shaking, whether from cold or shock, he couldn't tell. As they walked toward the exit, she suddenly stopped. Mr. Kong, I need to tell you something. The men who took me, before they brought me here, they took me somewhere else first. Another building. I only saw it for a few minutes, but there was a man there. An older man. He asked me questions about you. About what I knew. I didn't tell him anything, but... What did he look like? Silver hair. Very distinguished. He had kind eyes, but his voice was cold. And he kept calling you my nephew's son. Hanbin's blood turned to ice. Not my nephew, my nephew's son. That meant his father's brother, not his mother's. That meant Kong Suk-jun, but Imani's description didn't match his uncle. Which meant there was another player. Someone from an earlier generation. Someone who should have been dead. Jae-sung, he called out, his voice sharp. Get every piece of information we have on my father's family. Everyone. Including the ones we thought were dead. I need it in the next hour. As they drove back to Seoul, Imani fell asleep in the back seat, her head against the window, exhausted from her ordeal. Hanbin watched her in the rearview mirror, this woman who had sacrificed so much for a secret that wasn't even hers to keep. His phone buzzed with a message from Beck, found Young Ji-taek's office. We're going in now. 30 minutes later, another message, you need to see what we found. This goes deeper than we thought. By the time they reached Seoul, dawn was breaking over the city. Hanbin took Imani directly to his penthouse, where he had arranged for a doctor to examine her. While the doctor worked, he met with Beck in his study. What did you find? Beck laid out a series of documents on the desk. Young Ji-taek's files. He's been coordinating surveillance on you for the past year, not 6 months. But it gets worse. Look at who's been paying him. Hanbin picked up the bank transfer records. The amounts were staggering, and they were coming from an account he recognized, his own organization's pension fund. Someone had been siphoning money from the syndicate's own coffers to finance an operation against him. Who has access to this account? Only 3 people. You, your uncle Suk-jun, and your CFO, Nam Gw-hyun. Bring me Nam. Now. But before Beck could make the call, Hanbin's phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, calling from overseas. Hello? Hello, Hanbin. The voice was elderly, refined, and speaking in a dialect Hanbin hadn't heard since his childhood. I think it's time we met. Your father's legacy has questions to answer, and you've proven yourself interesting enough to deserve the truth. There's a restaurant in Myeongdong, the old Moonlight Garden. Meet me there at noon today. Come alone. If you bring your men, you'll never learn who really ordered your father to kill Prosecutor Yoon all those years ago. And you'll never understand why your maid had to be taken to bring you to this conversation. The line went dead. Hanbin stood frozen, the implications cascading through his mind. His father hadn't acted alone in 1995. Someone had given the order. Someone who was still alive, still watching, still playing games with the Kong Empire. And they had taken Imani not to silence her, but to get his attention. Change of plans, he told Beck. I have a meeting at noon. Until then, I want everyone we trust watching Imani. And I mean everyone we trust, which at this point might just be Jae-sung and you. Someone in our organization has been stealing from us to finance this operation. Until we know who, trust no one. What have you been letting others sacrifice for your own comfort while you stayed blind to their struggles? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what you think about Hanbin's journey so far. The Moonlight Garden was a relic from another era, one of the few restaurants in Seoul that had survived since before the Korean War. It occupied the third floor of a building in Myeongdong, accessible only by a narrow staircase that wound past closed storefronts and faded advertisements. Hanbin had eaten here once as a child, brought by his father for what he now understood had been a meeting with someone important. He remembered the way his father had been nervous that day, checking his watch repeatedly, speaking in careful, measured tones. He was seeing that same careful tension in himself now as he climbed those stairs at exactly 11:55 a.m. He had left Jae-sung and his security team blocks away, though he knew they were tracking his phone and ready to move at the first sign of trouble. In his jacket pocket, he carried a small recording device. Whatever truth was about to be revealed, he wanted proof. The restaurant itself was empty, closed for a private event according to the sign on the door. But the door was unlocked, and when Hanbin entered, he found himself in a space that looked frozen in 1960. Traditional low tables, paper lanterns casting soft light, walls decorated with calligraphy that spoke of honor and duty. And at a table in the back, sitting cross-legged with a cup of tea steaming before him, was a man who looked like a ghost. Kong Dae-won. Hanbin's grandfather's younger brother. A man who, according to every family record, had died in 1997 in a car accident. Uncle, Hanbin said, using the formal honorific despite his shock. I was told you were dead. I was, the old man replied, his voice the same one from the phone call. In every way that mattered. Please, sit. We have much to discuss, and I'm 93 years old. I don't have the luxury of time for dramatic revelations. Hanbin sat, his mind racing. Dae-won had been his grandfather's enforcer, the man who had built the Kong organization's reputation for ruthlessness in the decades after the war. He had been a legend, spoken of in whispers as the ghost of Gangnam, a man who could end conflicts with a single decision. And he was supposed to be dead. Why reveal yourself now? Because you passed the test, Dae-won said simply. When your maid was taken, you had choices. You could have written her off as acceptable losses. You could have handled it quietly through back channels to avoid showing weakness. Instead, you went to the police. You mobilized your entire organization. You put yourself at risk to save a woman who, in our world, shouldn't have mattered. That told me everything I needed to know. You orchestrated this? You had Imani kidnapped as a test? I did. And before you reach for the weapon I know you're carrying, understand that she was never in real danger. My men had orders to ensure her comfort and safety. The fear she experienced was unfortunate but necessary. Hanbin's hand was indeed near his concealed weapon. Necessary for what? To see if you were your father's son, or your own man. Dae-won poured a second cup of tea and slid it across the table. Your father, Dae-young, was brilliant. Ruthless when needed, strategic always. He built this empire into something remarkable. But he had a fundamental flaw: he believed that power came from fear alone. He never understood that true power comes from loyalty that is earned, not compelled. What does this have to do with Prosecutor Yoon? Everything. You see, the murder of Yoon and his family wasn't Dae-young's decision. It was mine. The room seemed to tilt. Hanbin gripped the edge of the table. You. I was the one who discovered that Yoon was getting too close to documenting our political connections. I was the one who determined he needed to be eliminated. I gave the order, and your father executed it. But here's what you don't know: your father argued against it. He said there were other ways to handle the situation, quieter ways, ways that didn't involve killing children. I overruled him. I insisted it had to be absolute, had to send a message that no one could threaten the Kong family. Dae-won's hands trembled slightly as he lifted his teacup. I was wrong. The murder of that family didn't protect us, it haunted us. It haunted your father until the day he died. He never forgave me for making him into a child killer. And I never forgave myself for not listening to him. So you faked your death? After your father died, I realized the organization was heading in a direction I could no longer influence. Your uncle Suk-jun was pushing for expansion, for more violence, for a return to the old ways. I saw the writing on the wall: civil war within the family was coming. So I removed myself from the equation. Let everyone think I was dead. Watched from a distance to see what would happen. And what did happen? You happened. Dae-won smiled, the expression transforming his severe features. You took over the organization and immediately began changing it. Legitimizing operations where possible. Reducing violence. Treating your people with respect rather than ruling through terror. I watched you turn down opportunities for expansion because they would have required actions you found morally objectionable. I watched you pay your employees well, ensure they had healthcare, create systems of accountability. You were building something different. Something better. But you still had my maid kidnapped. Because I needed to know if your compassion was weakness or strength. In our world, Hanbin, kindness is often confused with vulnerability. I had to see what you would do when someone you cared about was taken. Would you fold? Would you overreact with unnecessary violence? Or would you thread the needle, showing both determination and restraint? This was all a game to you. No, Dae-won said firmly. This was an inheritance. You see, I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer. I have perhaps 6 months left. And before I go, I needed to ensure the organization was in the right hands. Suk-jun believes he should lead, but he would take us back to the darkness your father and I created. You're the only one with a chance to move us forward. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. This contains documentation of everything. The real story of 1995, including my confession and exoneration of your father. Proof that the order came from me, not him. It also contains evidence of Suk-jun's embezzlement over the past 8 years. He's been stealing from the organization, preparing for a coup. And finally, it contains the location of accounts I've maintained separately from the organization, clean money, legally obtained through legitimate investments. Enough to fund your transition away from criminal operations entirely if you choose. Hanbin stared at the envelope. Why give this to me? Because you're the first Kong in 3 generations who might actually deserve it. Because your father would have wanted you to have a choice he never did. And because that maid of yours, Imani, showed me something I didn't expect. What? She showed me that loyalty can exist without fear. I had my men watching her for months before the kidnapping. Do you know what they reported? She never stole from you, never spoke ill of you to others, never betrayed your trust in any way. Even when she was dying from kidney disease and could barely afford treatment, she never asked you for help. She just kept showing up, doing her work with dignity and grace. That kind of loyalty isn't bought or threatened into existence. It's earned through how you treat people when you don't think anyone is watching. Daewon stood slowly, his aged body protesting the movement. I'm going to leave now. What you do with that envelope is your choice. But know this, Suk-jun is planning to move against you within the next week. He's been building alliances, positioning loyalists, preparing to challenge your leadership. He believes the kidnapping of your maid has shown the organization that you're weak. You need to act first. And if I choose to let him try? Then you're a better man than I ever was, but probably a dead one. Daewon walked toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Your maid, Imani. The medical bills you found in her apartment? I've been paying them. Through a shell company, anonymously. I couldn't let her die for keeping our secret. It seemed the least I could do. You've been helping her? For 2 years now. Since I learned she knew about 1995 and chose silence. I made sure her treatments continued, that she had what she needed. Not enough to raise suspicion, but enough to keep her alive. Because unlike your uncle, I understood that she wasn't a threat to be eliminated, she was a treasure to be protected. And with that, the old man was gone, leaving Hanbin alone in a restaurant that smelled of history and tea, holding an envelope that contained the power to reshape his entire world. He sat there for a long time, thinking about his father, about Imani, about the weight of legacies and the cost of secrets. Finally, he opened the envelope and began reading. The documents were exactly as Daewon had described. His father's innocence was proven beyond doubt. The order for the Yoon family's murder had come from Daewon, executed reluctantly by Dae-young, who had argued against it. There were even recordings, old cassette tapes that had been digitized, of his father pleading for another solution. The evidence against Suk-jun was equally damning. Embezzlement, conspiracy, plans for a hostile takeover. And lists of people within the organization who had been paid to switch their loyalty, including Nam Gwi-hyun, the CFO. And finally, the bank accounts. Hundreds of millions of dollars, all legally obtained, all ready to be used for legitimate purposes. Hanbin called Jae-sung. Gather everyone. The entire inner circle. Conference room in 2 hours. And bring Suk-jun. Tell him it's mandatory. Should we be worried? Yes. But not about what you think. The conference room of the Kong organization had witnessed countless decisions over the decades. Territory divisions, business deals, sentences of death. But it had never seen anything quite like what was about to happen. Hanbin stood at the head of the table, Imani seated beside him in a chair that had never held anyone below executive level. She wore simple clothes, still recovering from her ordeal, but she sat with dignity, her presence a statement. On Hanbin's other side sat Jae-sung, his most trusted ally. Around the table were the 8 men who ran the organization, including a visibly uncomfortable Suk-jun. Thank you all for coming, Hanbin began. I've called this meeting to address several issues that have come to light. But first, I want to introduce you properly to Imani Okafor. Most of you have seen her in my penthouse over the years. Some of you probably never learned her name. Today, that changes. He gestured to Imani, who looked terrified but determined. For 7 years, this woman has served this organization with a loyalty that should shame every one of us. She discovered a secret that could have destroyed us, and instead of selling that information or using it against us, she kept silent. While dying from kidney disease. While barely able to afford her treatment. She protected us when she had every reason not to. Hanbin, Sukjun interrupted, "What is the point of this? We're all very sorry about what happened to your maid, but this is hardly appropriate for." "Sit down and shut up, uncle." Hanbin's voice was ice. "You'll get your turn to speak." Sukjun's face flushed with anger, but he remained silent. 3 days ago, Hanbin continued, Imani was kidnapped as part of a test. A test orchestrated by our great-uncle, Kong Dae-won, who most of you believed was dead. He wanted to see how I would respond. Would I abandon her? Would I act with restraint or with senseless violence? Would I prove myself worthy of leading this organization into a different future? The room erupted in murmurs. Daewon's name carried weight, legend, fear. I passed his test, apparently. And before he disappeared again, he's dying, by the way, cancer, he gave me this. Hanbin held up the envelope. Documentation of everything. The truth about 1995 and who really gave the order to kill Prosecutor Yoon and his family. Evidence that my father argued against it and was overruled. Proof that the secret Imani has been protecting wasn't even my father's sin, it was Daewon's. He let that sink in for a moment before continuing. But that's not the most interesting part. The most interesting part is what else Daewon documented. Evidence of embezzlement from our organization. Evidence of conspiracy to overthrow my leadership. Evidence of betrayal by people in this room. Now every eye in the room shifted to Sukjun, except for Nam Gw Hyun, who had gone pale. Uncle, Hanbin said, turning to face Sukjun directly, you've been stealing from this organization for 8 years. You've been recruiting loyalists to support a coup. You've been undermining my authority while pretending to counsel me. And worst of all, you've been doing it in the name of protecting my father's legacy, when in fact, you've been destroying everything he tried to build. Sukjun stood slowly. If this is true, if I'm such a traitor, then why am I still breathing? Why bring me here instead of just disappearing me like you did that kidnapper? Because I'm not my father, and I'm certainly not Daewon. I don't solve problems with murder when other solutions exist. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to retire. Effective immediately. You'll keep a generous pension, I'm not cruel, but you'll have no role in operations. You'll turn over all accounts, all contacts, all leverage. And in return, you get to live out your days in the family compound, comfortable and secure. And if I refuse? Then I turn this evidence over to the prosecutors who have been looking for a reason to tear apart this organization for decades. You'll spend your final years in prison, and the Kong name will be destroyed in the process. Your choice, uncle. Comfortable retirement or public disgrace? The room was silent. Everyone understood they were witnessing a transfer of power, but not through violence, through something harder. Through accountability. Sukjun looked around the table, perhaps hoping for support, but found none. Finally, he nodded. Fine. I'll retire. But you're making a mistake, Hanbin. This organization was built on fear. Without it, you'll be weak. Maybe, Hanbin replied. Or maybe it was built on loyalty, and fear was just what we used when we couldn't earn that loyalty honestly. I guess we'll find out. After Suk-jun was escorted out by Jae-sung, Hanbin turned to the remaining executives. Now, about Nam Gw-hyun. The CFO looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. You were part of my uncle's conspiracy. You helped him embezzle funds. By rights, you should be sitting in the shipyard basement right now. Please, Nam whispered, I have a family. Children. So did Prosecutor Yoon, Hanbin said coldly. Then he sighed. But I'm trying to build something different here. So here's your deal. You're going to spend the next year helping Beck audit every financial transaction this organization has made in the past decade. You're going to help us legitimate operations where possible. You're going to use your skills to clean us up instead of hiding our dirt. And if you do that successfully, you get to keep your position. Betray me again, and there won't be a third chance. Understood? Nam nodded vigorously, relief evident on his face. As for the rest of you, Hanbin addressed the table, I'm not my father, and I'm not my uncle. I'm not interested in building an empire on fear and violence. I'm interested in building something that can last, something that doesn't require us to sacrifice our humanity. Some of you will hate this change. If that's the case, you're free to leave. I'll give you generous severance and a clean exit. But if you stay on my terms. Loyalty earned, not extorted. Respect given, not demanded. We do business smart and when possible, legal. We treat our people well. And we never, ever, abandon someone who's been loyal to us. He looked at Imani, who had tears in her eyes. This woman taught me that lesson. She was loyal when she had every reason not to be. She sacrificed her health to protect a secret that wasn't hers to keep. And I was so blind, so caught up in maintaining my empire, that I never even noticed she was dying. Hanbin turned back to the executives. That changes now. Every person who works for this organization will have healthcare. Real healthcare, not the bare minimum. We're going to create a fund for emergencies, for when our people need help. We're going to treat everyone, from our highest earners to our cleaners, with dignity. Because if we can't do that, we don't deserve to lead anything. Baek Tae-young spoke up. Boss, this is going to cost. I know what it's going to cost. Day one left us funds to cover it. Clean money, legally obtained. We're going to use it to transition operations. It won't happen overnight, but it starts today. The meeting continued for 2 more hours, Hanbin laying out his vision for the organization's future. Some of the executives looked skeptical. Others looked intrigued. But all of them understood that the old ways were ending. After everyone left, only Imani remained, sitting quietly in the big leather chair. I'm sorry, Hanbin said, sitting beside her. For all of it. For not seeing you. For not protecting you. For letting you carry a burden that was never yours. You came for me, Imani said softly. When I was taken, I thought maybe you wouldn't. I thought maybe I was just the help, not worth the trouble. But you came. You moved the whole city to find me. I should have been seeing you all along. 7 years, Imani. 7 years you made my tea, cleaned my home, made my life livable. And I never once asked if you needed anything. I didn't want to need anything. I know. But that's what made it worse. You had such pride, such dignity. You were dying and never said a word. Imani smiled gently. I wasn't ready to admit I was weak. Funny, right? I came to this country to be strong, to build a new life. Asking for help felt like failing. It's not weakness to need help. I'm learning that now. Hanbin pulled out his phone and made a call. Dr. Song? This is Kong Hanbin. I need you to arrange a consultation at Seoul National University Hospital. Kidney transplant evaluation. Cost is irrelevant. I want the best team available. Yes, immediately. And doctor? I'm a potential donor. Test me first. Imani's eyes went wide. Mr. Kong, you can't. I can. And I will. You gave me 7 years of your life. The least I can do is make sure you have decades more. But your position, your health, the risk is nothing compared to what you risked for me. Hanbin took her hand, the gesture feeling both foreign and right. Imani, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if this new direction I'm taking the organization will work. I might fail spectacularly. My uncle might have been right that you need fear to maintain power. But I know one thing for certain, I want to try. I want to build something where people like you don't have to choose between their health and their dignity. Where loyalty is rewarded with actual care. Where we measure success not just in money but in lives protected and improved. That's a beautiful dream, Mr. Kong. Call me Hanbin. Please. And it's not just a dream anymore. It's a plan. And you're going to help me build it. Me? I'm just. You're not just anything. You're the woman who kept my father's secret, who protected this organization when you could have destroyed it. You're the woman who showed me what real loyalty looks like. I want you to join my executive team. I want your voice in that room, reminding all of us what actually matters. Imani laughed, a sound Hanbin realized he had never heard before. It was warm, genuine, full of life. You want a Nigerian maid with kidney disease on your crime syndicate's executive board? Former crime syndicate, if I have my way. And yes, I do. Because you have something none of those men have, you have a moral compass that actually works. You have perspective. You know what it's like to struggle, to be invisible, to be powerless. That's exactly the perspective we need. Over the following weeks, Hanbin's revolution unfolded. Suk-jun retired to the family compound, bitter but contained. Nam Gwa Hyun began the exhaustive work of auditing and legitimizing operations. Several executives left, unable to accept the new direction, but they were replaced by younger leaders who saw the vision of something better. Imani began her treatment, and to everyone's relief, Hanbin was found to be a compatible donor. The transplant was scheduled for 3 months out, giving both of them time to prepare. Detective Omina closed her investigation, satisfied that Imani was safe and that justice, in its own way, had been served. She never knew the full story, but she respected Hanbin for actually keeping his word. The Kong organization began its transformation. It would take years, perhaps decades, but the direction was set. Legitimate businesses were prioritized. Employee benefits were expanded. Violence became a last resort rather than a first option. And every morning, at exactly 6 a.m., the tea kettle in Hanbin's penthouse whistled. But now, sometimes he made the tea himself, and sometimes Imani made it, and sometimes they made it together, talking about the day ahead, about challenges and opportunities, about building something better from the ashes of something dark. One morning, 6 months after her kidnapping, as they sat drinking tea and watching the sun rise over Seoul, Imani asked, "Do you think your father would have approved of the changes you're making?" Hanbin considered this. I think he would have been terrified by them. He believed in the old ways, in power through fear. But I also think, in his heart, he wished he could have chosen differently. That conversation day one recorded, where my father argued against killing the Yoon family, that was real. That was who he wanted to be but couldn't, given the circumstances of his position. And you can be different because? Because of you, Hanbin said simply. Because you showed me that strength and kindness aren't opposites. That you can be loyal without being servile. That you can be powerful without being cruel. You were dying, Imani. Dying. And you still chose integrity over opportunity. That's stronger than anything my father or uncle ever built. Imani smiled, the morning light making her face glow. You give me too much credit. And you still don't give yourself enough. Hanbin raised his teacup. To new beginnings. To building something worth protecting. She touched her cup to his. To seeing people. Really seeing them. To second chances. And third and fourth, Imani added with a laugh. As they drank their tea, the city waking up around them, neither of them noticed the figure watching from a building across the way. Kong Dae-won, in the final months of his life, smiled at what he saw. His great-nephew had passed not just the test, but transcended it. The Kong legacy, built on blood and fear, was being transformed into something that might actually last. He turned away from the window, his work complete. The organization was in the right hands. The old sins were documented and atoned for. And most importantly, his family had learned what he had taken 90 years to understand, that true power comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the choice not to. Several months later, the transplant surgery was successful. Both Hanbin and Imani recovered, though the doctors insisted on careful monitoring. The day Hanbin was released from the hospital, his entire executive team was waiting, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. A year after that, the Kong organization completed its first fully legitimate business quarter. Profits were lower, but sustainable. Employee satisfaction was higher than it had ever been. And for the first time in the syndicate's 70-year history, no one had been killed in the pursuit of business. Imani, now serving as Director of Human Resources and Ethical Operations, a position that didn't exist before she took it, oversaw the transformation of workplace culture. She implemented programs for education, healthcare, and personal development. She advocated for workers' rights. She became the conscience of an organization that had never had one. And every morning, she and Hanbin still shared tea at 6 a.m. Sometimes they discussed business. Sometimes they discussed philosophy. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, two people who had saved each other in ways neither fully understood. One morning, as the city came alive beneath them, Imani said, "You know what I think about sometimes?" "What's that?" "That moment when I heard the door break open at the warehouse. When I saw you come through. I had been so scared, thinking I was going to die without ever mattering to anyone. And then you were there. You had moved heaven and earth to find me. And I realized I had mattered all along. I just hadn't seen it." Hanbin set down his teacup. "I think about that too. But I think about what came before. 7 years of you showing up, making tea, doing your work with grace and dignity. You mattered all along, Imani. I was just too blind to see it. You were never just my maid. You were my reminder that there was good in the world, even in the darkness I operated in." "We saved each other," Imani said softly. "Yeah," Hanbin agreed. "I guess we did. As the sun fully rose over Seoul, casting light on a city that was the same as it had always been and yet somehow different, Hanbin thought about his father, his great-uncle, the weight of legacy, and the possibility of redemption. He thought about Amani, about loyalty, about the courage it takes to be kind in a cruel world. And he realized that the Ice King of Seoul had finally melted, not into weakness, but into something far more powerful. Into humanity. The organization he now led would never be perfect. The past couldn't be erased, and the complete transformation he envisioned would take decades. But the direction was set. The old ways were ending. And in their place, something new was growing, nurtured by the most unlikely of gardeners, a Korean Mafia boss and a Nigerian maid who had taught each other what it meant to truly see another person. If this story touched you, if it made you think about the people in your life you might not be seeing, if it reminded you that everyone has struggles you know nothing about, then please, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like this matter. Stories about redemption, about second chances, about choosing to be better than your legacy demands, these stories need to be told. And I can only keep telling them if you're here with me. So hit that subscribe button. Share this video. And let me know in the comments, what will you do differently after hearing Hanbin and Amani's story? How will you see the people around you with new eyes? I'll be reading every comment. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Choose kindness. Choose to see people. Choose to be better. Until the next story, take care of yourselves and each other.